261 may just be the darkest, most uncomfortable chapter in the entire manga. For what feels like the millionth time, we have yet another chapter that has split the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom in two. You got the lovers and the haters. Of course, those who hated the chapter will still be there in 2 weeks to see what happens next because this manga is too damn addictive and there's basically nothing Gege can do at this point to make them drop the series, but that's besides the point. I'm not here to talk about anybody else and their feelings. Today's video is going to be a little different. If you follow me on Twitter at radman_v2 because my last one got sniped, you'll know that my initial response to the leaks were not positive. It was incredibly reactionary in a way that I would argue is not only perfectly warranted, but intended by Gege with what went down in this ridiculous chapter. Not long ago, Gege Akutami off-screened the final blow of the most built-up, most important battle of the story, and yet 261 is still a bolder, more audacious chapter overall. Gege has zero chill, and even though that's probably my favorite thing about the manga, it also leads to situations like this, where the immediate reaction to these kinds of developments in the story can end up being a little extreme, or in some cases even irrational. I read these leaks and I felt like I just witnessed a murder, bro. I felt like complete shit. I thought the manga was cooked, that all hope was lost, and Gege just wasted like 3 years of my time. That lasted for like 10 minutes and then I calmed down a bit and tried to see things a little clearer, but the point is, this chapter is a roller coaster of emotions that makes you like, it wants to make you feel like shit, right? That's what I want to talk about today. This video is completely unscripted, as you can probably tell. I have a bunch of bullet points on my screen of different things I want to cover, but for the sake of being as transparent as possible, I want to do this off the cuff. There's going to be some analysis, I guess, but not as calculated or as precise as usual. I'm kind of just going to ramble and do my thing. With that out of the way, let's talk about chapter 261 of Jujutsu Kaisen and how it almost broke me. First things first, let's get the elephant out of the room. We have received confirmation of Kenjaku's death, although to be perfectly honest, I don't know if I can even consider this confirmation. It isn't too different to what 249 gave us with Yuta sticking his sword through their head. Gege, as the annoying weirdo we all know them to be, has basically pulled a Nobara 2.0. What do I mean by this? They have written a death so inconclusive and ambiguous that there will be people, myself included, coping that Kenjaku is not actually dead until he either returns or the manga ends. In basically all my recent JJK videos, I've been coping about Kenjaku making a return, and it truly does feel like all hope is lost, but I'm gonna keep on coping. There are genuinely 1,000 ways Gege could plausibly write Kenjaku back into the story, and most of them hinge upon the merger taking place, which I still firmly believe absolutely needs to happen. I refuse to see a future where the merger is just one of those nukes on a timer that the protagonist will successfully prevent, and that's the big win of the arc. There's just way too much going into the merger actually taking place in some way, shape or form, and I've already discussed why I believe that in length in other videos, but genuinely speaking, right, if the merger doesn't happen, you can expect me to be on some super eye patch wolf timing with the fall of Jujutsu Kaisen. I will make it my life's mission to drag this series through the dirt if my sweet, beautiful merger never takes place. And I'm only half joking here. Obviously, I'm over exaggerating, but that would be like the One Piece being a coconut levels of disappointment, bro. Kenjaku and the merger are narratively inseparable, and so for that reason, this is all I really have to say on the Kenjaku matter. If he remains dead, he will be going down as one of the biggest disappointments Weekly Shonen Jump has ever seen as far as antags go. That's just my stance, but of course, that isn't set in stone. I'm open to having my mind changed depending on the future of the story. Anyways, nobody gives a fuck about Kenjaku. Let's talk about the real meat of the chapter. Satoru Gojo is back in the flesh. Like literally, he's fighting Sukuna right now, but it's not actually Satoru Gojo. It's my man Yuta Okotsu. Now, I've never really been a big fan of Yuta. I've always found him to be pretty stale as a character who serves an interesting functional role as a clear anomaly in the world of Jujutsu Sorcerers. He's like the second MC, he's the prodigy, the next Satoru Gojo, the character with the most humanity in the cast. All these really cool ideas, right? But nothing about him was particularly compelling or interesting for me to really get invested in his character. And that was a major contributor to my initial reaction when I saw the leaks. I was like, Yuta? I felt like the timing was jarring, like it sidesteps the catharsis of finally seeing Yuji show out like never before, only for Yuta to step in with a body that isn't even his. And most importantly, I felt like it put my favorite character and my favorite chapter in jeopardy. Satoru Gojo and 236. That was my initial reaction. But after a lot of thinking, a lot of conversations with friends, shout out Shah the GOAT if you're watching this, the chapter went from a, ooh, I don't know about this Gege, to holy shit Gege, you are a sick fuck and this might just be some of the best stuff you've ever pulled. Allow me to explain the thought process. From the beginning, I felt like there was nothing really wrong with Gojo's body being back as long as he remains dead and completely out of the picture as a person. It's perfectly consistent thematically, narratively, in terms of the character writing, everything really. It's not just consistent, but honestly it's expected. If you have someone like Yuta who can copy techniques, being the one to make contact with the body hopper Kenjaku, it seems pretty smart to me that our protagonist would come up with this plan. You get Gojo's body as a tool, which he has always been, while still keeping him out of the picture as an individual. Yes, his dead body is being exploited. Yes, he has to fight for his society, even in death. But my guy gave consent because it is exactly what he would have wanted. And most importantly, in terms of timeline, this was a plan that was formulated long before Gojo died. That's an important thing to note. It kind of reminds me of Attack on Titan, minor spoilers, but it's like the 139 conversation between Eren and Armin, which actually took place during 131, chronologically speaking. 138 remains Eren's final scene, just like 236 is for Gojo. This is showing us something that simply substantiates the conclusion. It's kind of genius really. You give Gojo that salvation in death as a person, right, whilst doubling down on all the issues that made Gojo need to be freed in the first place. Everything about Gojo vs Sukuna was specifically written to free Gojo from the burden of being the sole strongest, having to do everything alone, right down to Sukuna's world cutter literally lifting the self-imposed barrier of limitless that made Gojo unreachable. That is still the case. We're just getting to see a plan formulated before his death that feeds into the dehumanization of Gojo, and at the same time this plan also kind of frees him from being the sole strongest, since his body is literally being used like a puppet on strings by the next generation he so desperately hoped could replace him. And that's kind of happening like literally. It's perfectly consistent in my opinion. It's sad, it's painful that things have come to this, and the entire chapter makes that abundantly clear. The confirmation that Gojo was the one who killed all the higher-ups, even though he specifically stated he wouldn't do that because he wanted to effectuate real systemic change in the society, is incredibly tragic. It feels terrible to read, but these characters feel a million times worse for having to actually do these things. They're human just like us. That's what Gege is going for. The main thing that concerns me is this line of dialogue from Kenjaku in Shibuya. The body is the soul and the soul is the body. I really don't want to see Gojo, the person, his soul, play any role in the future of the manga. I don't think he will. I think Gege is going to make a firm stance in the upcoming chapters that spell out the fact Gojo is long gone. The man is dead. He is resting in peace with his best friend / boyfriend, whatever. But even in death, the strongest remains a tool. The realization that really made this chapter click for me actually came from the fan reception. Seeing how certain Gojo fans responded to the leaks only served to consolidate my interpretation of his character and some of the thematic concepts surrounding him. If you're on Twitter, you'll know that a whole lot of Gojo fans have been parading the timeline with their crazy theories about his inevitable return. Shout out Big Daddy Gojo. I've been against this idea because I just want my guy to rest. That's also why the leaks made me want to jump off a building until I got some much needed therapy in my DMs. Gojo should stay dead. He is a closed book, but he is technically back, and I love that. Why? Because I think this chapter was specifically written with fan reception in mind. I mean, nobody in their right mind takes the poster boy of their story, who is one of the most universally beloved characters to come out of Japan, and tease their return in 260 only to double down on their death in such a visceral, disgusting way. Like, what did Gege mean by that? What was he trying to do? What was he trying to evoke out of the readers? People wanted Gojo back even though his death was the first time he could truly feel happy, right? Is that not eerily similar to how Gojo is viewed and treated as a tool in universe? Whether it's because you can't see anybody else defeat Sukuna, or because you just love him and want to see him again, the idea of wanting Gojo, a fictional character, a narrative tool by all definitions, to return even though that's the last thing he himself would want, is fundamentally no different to the way he's exploited by the Jujutsu Society. I can already see the comments telling me I'm making up a bullshit meta reasoning to defend this garbage, and more power to you honestly, but this is how Gege writes, and it's incredibly effective if you ask me. Gege wanted you to feel betrayed. He wanted you to disagree with this decision and ask questions. What does the story gain from this? What do the characters gain from this? The two main antagonists of the story are quite literally parasites, right? You have Sukuna, who unnaturally exists in the current era, who has literally taken possession of both the main protagonist and deuteragonist's bodies at some point. And then you have Lobotomy Kaisen's #1 advocate, Kenjaku, who has been hopping bodies for at least a millennium. I've spoken at length about how the narrative seems to punish anybody who goes against Sukuna's ideals or who doesn't align with them, how those that cherish bonds and don't serve their own interests suffer. There is no greater proof of this than Yuta literally going against everything he stands for and becoming a monster, as he calls it, because the situation demands it. When Kusakabe spoke back against it, he responded with pure pragmatism because this situation fucking needs it. Because Sukuna, this devil of a villain, has forced everybody to kneel, to become monsters just like him if they hope to defeat him. But there's one noteworthy distinction, in my opinion. When Sukuna took over Megami's body, that was entirely forceful. When Kenjaku took Geto's body, the man was a corpse with zero agency, and I doubt he asked for permission to use any of the bodies he previously inhabited. But Gojo knew this was going to happen and gave his permission. Just like Sukuna told Yorozu, he doesn't care about what happens to his body after his death. He stops being the strongest, nothing matters. Yuta asking for consent is incredibly noteworthy, especially in the context of this story where agency and intent means absolutely everything. But that's still just one little distinction. The main takeaway from this is that Yuta, the character with the most humanity, the character who literally wields his love as a weapon, the antithesis of Sukuna in so many ways, even this guy has been forced to yield against this calamity. And it is precisely because of his sheer humanity that Yuta was forced to fold. It's because he is someone who cares so much, who loves his companion so much, that he is willing to use the corpse of the person who saved him from the absolute pits to save others. And when you think about it, using Gojo's body in this way is functionally no different to how Yuta wields Rika. Both are literally dead loved ones, literal curses he is using to help people. That's the foundation of Jujutsu after all, using curses to fight curses. I never thought the day would come where this man Yuta is moving me, but it really feels like every single thing prior to this chapter was simply working up to this moment. From Yuji confusing him with Gojo, to Kenjaku saying he can never be the next Gojo, to Maki grabbing his shoulder after Gojo's death almost as if she's comforting him, knowing what he will have to do, to various little things in Volume 0 that have gained an entirely new flavour thanks to the context of this latest chapter. The central thing about 261 in my opinion is that it feels wrong. It feels so wrong to be using Gojo in this way. It feels so wrong for the last character you'd expect to fold against Sukuna's ideals to do just that. It's deeply unsettling to read, and I think that's incredibly effective because that's exactly how these characters are feeling. There's a reason why Gege has deliberately kept Yuji in the dark. He hasn't allowed for Yuji to learn of his comrades' plans that require them to literally discard their humanity and become monsters. And the reason he gave us is because his connection to Sukuna is a potential compromise, because he unfortunately cannot be trusted as somebody so closely linked to the King of Curses, the monster of all monsters. And yet I think we can all agree that if Yuji knew what his comrades had planned for Gojo's corpse, he would not stand for it at all. That's the realization that made me go from incredibly concerned for the future of Jujutsu Kaisen to incredibly excited for what's coming next. I think Yuji has been gradually veering away from the Cog mentality, the dehumanization that every sorcerer must undergo in order to keep the big machine running, right? They have to discard their own personal values and thoughts and work as this monolith, as this joint enterprise where everybody works together with one big brain. Most people, including myself, just last week, were expecting Yuji to become the demon god he has been ever foreshadowed to be. But I'm expecting a massive subversion of expectations now. I guess it's not a subversion if I'm expecting it, but still, Yuta, the character with the most humanity, has become a monster, right? And Yuji, the character with every single reason to become a monster, I think is going to be the one to finally trump Sukuna's ideals by clinging to his humanity. That's the vision I see for the future of the story. Everybody around Yuji is keeping him in the dark out of fear for his tie to Sukuna, when in reality, this is saving him from having to objectify himself and follow orders he wholeheartedly doesn't want to. Everybody around Yuji is willing to discard their humanity for the sake of the win, for the greater good, but Yuji will not stand for that. I have never been more sure of anything in Jujutsu Kaisen than this. Yes, It sucks that Yuji at the peak of his performance has been sidelined in some ways, has had his glory taken from him by Yuta/Gojo's intervention. I know there's a massive chance he would have died if Sukuna popped off that domain expansion, but that doesn't change the fact the ridiculous momentum Gege had garnered for Yuji was completely halted by 261. But it's just the cycle spinning once again. Yuji always gets sidestepped. This is nothing new. Every time he gets sidestepped, he comes back stronger. He'll probably play an important supporting role in the next few chapters alongside Todo and Yuta, but Sukuna isn't gonna be defeated by Gojo 2.0. That would be incredibly redundant in a way that Gege simply doesn't write. The 5-minute timer will reach its end, and Yuji will cook. There's nothing that makes as much sense to me as this. I think I've said everything I wanted to say, but I apologize for how messy and incoherent this video probably is. I hate doing chapter reviews for a reason, but the roller coaster of emotions this chapter provided is something I just needed to talk about. It somehow made Gojo an even better character than he already was. It elevated Yuta from a character I thought was cool to someone I'm very emotionally invested in now, and it gave me so much hope for the future of this story drenched in darkness to provide some light at the end of the tunnel. Yuji's I'm you moment with Sukuna is coming, but it's gonna be a complete inversion of the Mahito situation. Against Mahito, Yuji discarded his sense of self and resigned to being no different than the curse he hated more than anything in the world. It was purely metaphorical, but with Sukuna, he may literally be him, or at least some part of him, and it is embracing his sense of self that will buy him the win. No kind of genetic or blood connection to Sukuna will make Yuji like him. He will remain Yuji Itadori until the very end. That's just my 2 cents on the chapter, and honestly I barely scratched the surface, but I hope you guys enjoyed my waffling. Thank you for watching, and let me know how you felt about the chapter in the comments below. If you disliked the chapter, like this video so you know there's something in your life you can like. Bye. This is bye.